Hey folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. I'm here with my buddy Jimmy Faluca, all the way from the Northeast. Jimmy, tell me where you're at tonight, bro.
I, unfortunately, am in my bedroom. I have been banished to my bedroom by my wife because I have COVID and I cannot infect the kids.
Okay, well, luckily you can't affect us through the airwaves, but I know that Jimmy actually works in the hospital system, so I appreciate your service to everybody. And
Ah,
this thing is still a real deal, folks. So whatever you have to do, whether it's social
sad to say it
distance or
is.
yeah, I'm a vacciner. I mean, not to go into a whole political thing because I know that divides the audience, and we're here to talk about wrestling. But I did get I was a Pfizer vacciner guy. The last time I went, they slipped in Moderna without telling me, and I kind of felt a little sick for a couple of days because I think I wasn't used to the Moderna stuff. But to tell you the truth, brother, I've never gotten COVID, and so at least one person in this world gets the vaccines. It hasn't killed me yet and I've never had COVID, so I
Well,
can say
God
that.
forbid, we don't need that because we need you putting out that good knowledge out there.
Well, I appreciate that, bro. And Jimmy and I are going to be discussing tonight, and we do request that if you're out there watching, hop on over to One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel. That's the home base for this thing. And we will take any questions you have about pro wrestling. We stick with the pro wrestling topic. And our main topic tonight, Jimmy, is a particular thing. Last night on day one, Monday Night Raw, The Rock made an unadvertised appearance. He looked great. I mean, he's getting older like we all are, but he looked really good with his sunglasses. I believe Jinder Mahal was kind of and I want to talk about that too. Jinder Mahal was doing like an anti-American, very old school 1980s Iron Sheik type of rant. The Rock interrupts him, and The Rock basically, if let me see if I get this straight. The Rock, after he banished Jinder Mahal by beating him up, he said something to the effect of, "Hey, everybody, after I leave here tonight, The Rock's going to go out and get something to eat, and I want you people to help me decide: should I sit in a booth, should I sit at the bar, or should I sit at the head of the table?" And he's obviously making a reference to his first cousin, the current WWE Undisputed Universal Champion Roman Reigns. I'm trying to remember, I think it was SummerSlam 2020 that Roman got the Universal half of that. He basically jumped into a match between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman. And then about a year and a half later, he merged two titles by beating Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, and he's been champion now going on many years. We're into like 3 4 years of Roman Reigns having one of these belts. So
And it's only the beginning.
well, that's what gets us to this, Jimmy, because the whole preface of this conversation is, will what a lot of fans thought we would have this year is basically the build up to a rematch at WrestleMania 40 between Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. And what appears to be happening is that The Rock, just by making that appearance and by dropping that one sentence in the ring, now it seems like if they were going to have The Rock do that, it could be just a tease, but The Rock has so much power and so much attention on him and everything that he says and does, especially with pro wrestling fans even now, that the assumption based on this one line of dialogue is that The Rock is going to hop the line, supersede Cody Rhodes, supersede CM Punk, or anybody else, and somehow, whether he enters the Royal Rumble or not, we'll be seeing The Rock versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. I believe it's 40 in Philadelphia. So, Jimmy, what are your opening thoughts on this?
All right. I have a lot to say about this because this is a subject that I feel does not get the attention that it needs, nor is it put in proper context. The Rock is a megastar. There is no question about that. He's one of the few true blue megastars that the WWE organization has had. Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Stone Cold Steve Austin. You could even make a case for Vince McMahon himself and The Rock. Those are the truest megastars that the WWE had in the aspect of just them being there made the show must see, made it better. and they elevated the game of those around them. Stone Cold Steve Austin was never designed to be the top star, but he ended up becoming the top star. Now, Mikey, I'm going to ask you a series of yes or no questions. When Stone Cold was the top star, was there a monumental gap in credibility between him and The Undertaker?
No.
Was there a monumental gap in credibility between him and The Rock?
No.
Okay. Was there a monumental gap in credibility between him and Triple H once he reached the main event scene?
No.
Okay. The same thing with Hulk Hogan. Was there a monumental gap between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant?
No. No.
What about the Macho Man Randy Savage in terms
No.
of credibility of who they could beat?
Right. No. No.
Okay. So now we get to this Roman Reigns thing. I challenge our viewers. Don't just look at me as angry man yells at clouds. Don't look at me as the typical wrestling fan that just can't be happy. Believe me when I tell you, between work, builds, life in general, we look for reasons to be happy. We look for reasons to distract us from nonsense. But Mikey suffers from the same affliction that I have. I can't just turn off my brain and turn off my logic. One of the reasons I get along with Mikey is because he's a very logical individual. He doesn't allow people to pull the wool over his eyes. And I'm not trying to be insulting, but there's a lot of people that are willfully ignorant when it comes to this. Take Roman Reigns, look at all of his main events, look at all of the big names that he's beaten. A list that includes Bill Goldberg, Brock Lesnar multiple times,
Yes.
John Cena multiple times, Randy Orton multiple times, Triple H, The Undertaker, Edge, Chris Jericho, Daniel Bryan. This is a Hall of Fame list. Now, I want you to take that list and I want you to measure it against Kevin Owens, Bray Wyatt, God rest his soul, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, Sami Zayn, your current Intercontinental Champion, Gunther, who has been putting in work, LA Knight, who's the hottest star that they've had in the last 6 months. I sit here and I say unto you, why is there such a monumental gap between Roman and everybody else? Is it because he's truly that much greater than them all? Or is it because it has been manufactured that he is the only one to be credible? Because I can tell you this, if I mention the idea of Roman closing night one, I get looked at like I have 20 heads.
Right.
But everyone else is supposed to be happy to have that consolation prize, much like Seth Rollins right now, who's walking around with a literal consolation prize around his waist or over his shoulder. There should not be a monumental gap between Roman and Rollins, Roman and Owens, Roman and Drew McIntyre. There should be a group of guys that they're all on equal footing, and when they do meet, it means something. It's no different than, no one thinks of The Undertaker as a name on the level of Hogan or Austin or The Rock. But what was the biggest selling pay-per-view of the Attitude Era? The Highway to Hell. And what was that main event? Stone Cold and The Undertaker in Madison Square Garden. To this day, that was the best pay-per-view that they ever did. With
double baby face.
Guys going at it.
Double baby face match, by the way.
Exactly. So why did I say all of that? The match between Roman and The Rock is absolutely unnecessary. It is unnecessary for a few reasons. Number one, to me, the most important of them all, that's a victory that could make somebody's career. You know the way breaking the streak could have made somebody's career, but they wasted it on Brock Lesnar, who was already a legend? Now, I'll be the first to say I would have never broken the streak. But if we had no choice and said, listen, he wants to go out that way, who are you to tell Taker he can't go out on his back? Okay, fine. Let's pick the right person to take his place. You're not going to pick someone who's already established. You're going to pick someone that they could use they could use that accomplishment to pole vault the rest of their careers. To me, it's the same principle. If you're going to bring The Rock in, why would you feed him to someone that is not going to benefit from beating him? Especially a guy in Roman who I think we could both admit we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning. So he's not going to get any bigger than what he is. Roman has hit his peak. There is no breaking through to the next level because there is no next level for him. He's not that type of guy, that megastar type guy, that just him being there makes the show instantly sell out. They did record business at the Survivor Series. Was Roman Reigns on that show?
Yeah, you're right. He was not. He was not on the show at all.
They do record business regardless of who's there because the brand is the star now. That is what they have done because they no longer want to be subservient to the wrestlers or the audience. So that's one reason. Roman doesn't benefit from it. Number two, he don't need it. Did Brock Lesnar need to break the streak? No. And that's not my words. That's Mark Calloway's words.
Right.
He said it on the Austin podcast. Brock didn't need it. Those were his words. I ask you this simple question. Roman Reigns, the guy who beat The Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, Triple H, all at WrestleMania, the guy who beat Daniel Bryan, Edge, at the same time, Brock Lesnar, the guy who beat Randy Orton, the guy who's had 7 WrestleMania main events, he needs the push of beating The Rock? He needs that push?
Let me jump in here because we get some interactive stuff, and I think this is something that I wasn't planning to address, but we will because my buddy AJ has chimed in with an interesting proposal if he was the booker. So basically he's saying, Mikey, Roman, I'm not sure if he's saying this could happen or this will happen, but say Roman faces The Rock at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which I believe is typically in February or March, the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania, or sometimes they throw Roadblock in the middle of those two. And then he's saying Roman would beat The Rock at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. He would be the most dominant WWE wrestler ever. And then Cody gets the John Cena treatment, and Cody beats Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia. So basically what AJ is proposing, and I'm not sure if this is a prediction or just a proposal or just
exactly. I'm not sure either with the way he framed it. But my response to AJ is, again, does Roman gain anything from beating The Rock? Because number one, he's already the most dominant. And number two, he's already hated. So we're just looking to give him another achievement. To what end? You have The Rock. He can make someone's career. Roman doesn't benefit from that victory in the slightest. He doesn't become a bigger star. And I challenge anyone to tell me how he would. I welcome it. Correct me. So that way this will stop bothering me because honestly, it does. It comes off to me, Mikey, that everyone just wants to give everything to Roman. Like he hasn't been given enough as it is. And to hell with everybody else. To hell with the guys that bust their butts 300 days a year, that don't see their kids, that have to work through injuries, that have to do jobs and are expected to maintain their momentum. I just think it's grossly unfair.
Well, I would agree that it's unfair, but WWE has never been fair. And I'll take the devil's advocate position and say, why do I think that Rock and Roman, whether it's at WrestleMania this year, which I'm kind of leaning towards now, why would they do that? Or why would, first of all, I don't think they don't have to. They certainly don't have to, Jimmy. The tickets are already sold.
Yeah, they sold 90,000 tickets already. So it's not like they needed that match to sell the show. WrestleMania sells out just on the name alone. Right.
So here's why I think they will. It's not because they have to. It's because they want to. And specifically who the want is the guys themselves. Because if you watch the Young Rock show, which I didn't particularly like, but I had a friend of mine, a non-wrestling based friend, who loved the Young Rock show and would always tell me which episodes I had to watch. And there was one where they feature, the teenage Rock and his little cousin Roman Reigns, who's like 5 or 6. And the little Roman Reigns is trying to wrestle the Rock in the living room. And the teenage Rock says to the 5-year-old Roman Reigns, "Hey, cuz, the two of us having a wrestling match, that's something you got to save for WrestleMania. So, in my opinion, that's what you call, preemptive programming or programming your thoughts of the audience that this match is coming. And to me, Jimmy, this whole year of Cody Rhodes basically killing time, let's be honest,
Yeah,
and credit to Cody Rhodes, because I want to get back to Cody's involvement in this.
of course.
Cody is a placeholder. Cody is the understudy. For those in theater, being an understudy is a thankless job. If you've ever done a Broadway show or even community theater, and you're in a situation where you're the understudy, you're expected to have all these lines memorized. You don't get a whole.
They need you.
In case they need you, because basically, in case the real star, the scheduled actor or actress, no shows or gets sick or stubs their toe or has a mental breakdown, the understudy is expected to step in. And oftentimes, for instance, when you had a show like The Producers 20 years ago with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick on Broadway, if one of those two guys, Nathan or Matthew, was sick for a night and they had to bring in an understudy, a lot of times the audience loses a bit of their interest, right? So the understudy is in a terrible position. It is a thankless job. And there have been some theater actors who've been an understudy and have shined and have shocked the Broadway audience or whatever audience and gone on to bigger things. But in this pro wrestling scenario, my opinion, Jimmy, is they've kept Cody strong. He hasn't been a world beater. He lost to Brock at least once. I'm not sure if Cody took any pins or submissions to anybody else over the past year, but they've kept him very strong, and it's almost like Cody is an uncrowned champion. But at the same time, they didn't make him so strong that they couldn't live without Cody either. You know what I mean? And so it's quite conceivable, in my opinion, Jimmy, what they could end up, because I was trying to think of scenarios for WrestleMania, some of these matches. I think let's go with, if we do have Roman Reigns versus The Rock, I do not think they would do a 2-night Roman Reigns thing.
No,
some people are predicting that. I think basically Cody would be shoehorned in with Seth, and then the question is, well, then what does CM Punk do? Because we all think that we're going to see CM Punk versus Seth at Mania.
They already started that story when Seth confronted him on Raw. That was a segment that my future brother-in-law told me, Jim, you absolutely have to see this.
Right.
So because you know me, Mikey, I haven't watched a live Raw or SmackDown since WrestleMania 33, because as long as this guy's the top guy, I'm not investing, because I'm not gonna bother getting my hopes up. But I did go on YouTube and I did see that segment, and the seeds were already planted.
Right.
So The Rock coming back throws a monkey wrench into not just Cody Rhodes. There's my dad told me an old saying years ago, shit trickles downhill.
Yeah.
So Cody gets knocked out of his match that he rightfully belongs in. As much as I am not a huge fan of Cody, I recognize his popularity. And he absolutely should be in that match, considering how bad the finish was last year. Like, to this day, one of the worst finishes I've ever seen to a WrestleMania. Talk about deflating your audience.
Right. The rubber chicken got thrown into the ring with him,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's like, to me, that was like Starrcade 97 all over again. The finish everyone knows is coming, then doesn't come, and it just leaves you like, so you passed up Sami Zayn, who, if we remember last year, was anyone hotter than Sami?
Nope.
And they passed him up, stuck him in the tag division, had no plans after the tag match, and based on what he was doing, because I read all the results, because I don't mind checking that to see if I'm wrong. I'd rather be wrong and be educated rather than be right and miserable.
Sure.
But I read what they were doing with him afterwards. I'm like, wow, they really put no thought into after him and Kevin beat the Usos. And I knew that was going to be the case, which is why I didn't want him there in the first place. But Cody, to his credit, I don't hear that people are sitting on their hands for him. I don't ever hear that his reactions are dying down, which I'm glad to hear. But if we're at WrestleMania season and he's not challenging Roman, I seriously have to question, Cody, what could have been so bad in AEW that you decided to go back and let them dangle that carrot in front of your face? Because
Let
that's
me
essentially how it comes off.
Yeah, let me jump on that, and I'm going to answer that for you, buddy. I think that Cody made a error when, and look, folks, we know it's pro wrestling; they can do whatever they want. But Cody kind of booking himself in the wild, wild west that was the early AEW, and still to a measure is. Cody made that stipulation for a match with Chris Jericho in Baltimore. I think it was the first Full Gear pay-per-view in November of 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or October of 2019. Basically, Cody said before the match, if I don't win the title over Chris Jericho in Baltimore, I will never challenge for the AEW World title again. Now, that is before they had the TNT title. So at that time, they only had one singles title. Remember those days back in AEW? Now they have like 5 or 6, right?
They have
So
entirely too many. I'll be the first to say that. As a big fan of AEW, they have entirely too many belts. And if everyone has a belt, is it really all that special?
right,
Fair.
right. So let me finish this point on Cody here. Basically,
Please.
Cody booked himself into a corner. And I think that at that early stage of AEW, and probably a lot now still, the top wrestlers are kind of booking themselves, probably more so than any other major company in the last 30 or 40 years. So I think Cody did not want to be Jerry Lawler in Memphis, where he's basically giving himself the title over and over again, right? He didn't want to be that guy. But the problem is, Jimmy and everybody, I think that the fans wanted Cody to be that guy. I think at the time, the fans, they get it. They get that Cody's a executive vice president. They get that he's one of the top people. I think in 2019, 2020, Cody was very popular. The fans hadn't turned on him yet. I was there when they turned on him. I was in Daly's place. The moment they turned on Cody, the AEW fans, is when he did the All-American Boy promo, because he was going to have this match with a European guy, and nobody really bought into it, right? So, and they got sick of his wife, they got sick of Brandy, and they got sick of it. I think, to me, Jimmy, what happened is, and Cody has just said that there was a personal issue, he'll never disclose it, why he left AEW. I kind of think this is the reality, man. I think whatever the personal issue is, he could have worked out of it. But as a wrestler slash character, maybe taking himself or the business too seriously, Cody didn't want to be a tweener babyface. He didn't want to be the John Cena babyface that gets booed. And he did want to be a world champion, and he probably think, man, I kind of screwed up. I shouldn't have put that stip on the match with Jericho when MJF turned on me in Baltimore, because now I'll never be world champion. And the fans, because I'm just repeating myself as this TNT champion 2 or 3 times, and that's getting old, basically Cody booked himself to do exactly what he didn't want to do. But instead of being the world champion over and over again, now he's the TNT champion over and over again, which at the time was like the Intercontinental title for WWE. And I think Cody, in my opinion, Jimmy, whatever personal issue, whatever money issue, I think it all could have been worked out. I think Cody booked himself out of AEW with a stupid, silly idea with that stipulation. And he wanted to honor the stipulation. He did not want to be a wrestler who lost a stipulation match, and went back on his word. What do you think of what I just said?
Well, I can tell you this. Cody takes the business seriously enough to where I can absolutely buy what you just said. But what Cody didn't understand is that there was a way out of that. Cody would have had to win some kind of a match that forces him to have a championship match. And the perfect person to do that with would have been the guy that threw in the towel, MJF. I was saying at that time, this match is totally fine because MJF revealed himself to be a prick. He revealed himself to be a traitor to Cody. MJF gets the title. Cody wins some sort of tournament or battle royal where he is the #1 challenger. He's not just coming out and challenging for the belt like he would not be allowed to do. But, well, Cody won. I'm just throwing a name out there. He won the last chance. He won the championship battle royal. So he's the #1 contender. So contractually, he has to challenge for the title. So that's how you get around it. So
Yeah.
if he truly left because of that, I'd be like, Cody, I could have saved you a massive headache with that, because there's always a listen, to quote Batman, there's always a way out. There's always a way out. I have a feeling that something much deeper happened, because for him to leave a company he helped start
Right.
so early on, something significant had to happen.
Well,
I have no idea what it could be. Like, I'm stumped with that. I think about that quite a bit. Like, ever since the finish happened at Mania last year, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell were you thinking? Because you had to know, it's the old Kevin Nash, pardon my French, because I'm about to use some swear word. It's the old Kevin Nash line, let's book him, then fuck him. Because
yeah.
that's what I feel like happened. My very dear friend Larry put it in perfect perspective. They took one of the crown jewels of AEW, put him on WWE's biggest stage, and humiliated him and made him look like a fool. Because at this point, let's see, by the time we got to WrestleMania last year, that was Roman's third WrestleMania main event as a heel champion. At the 3-year mark, if you don't understand that this guy doesn't play fair, if you don't understand that he's constantly got backup coming to save his ass, and you show up with nobody, you look stupid. You look like an imbecile. It's like me and Mikey are going to a fight, but we know those guys bring shotguns and we're bringing pebbles.
Right.
We look stupid. So that's how, to me, that's how Cody looked. He looked absolutely stupid with that finish.
Let me jump in with it, because you said a bunch of stuff and I want to review some of it. I think that when people, like, for instance, in the Cody Rhodes documentary on the Peacock Network, a WWE produced documentary, right? So it's basically whatever their slant of things. Triple H had a little quote that went kind of viral. Triple H said something to the effect of, Cody didn't want to be the number one guy in a number two promotion. Basically saying that however big he got, he being Cody in AEW, would never equate to being the top guy or one of the top guys in WWE. Now, let me just argue that point real quick. Cody had his own reality show on either TBS or TNT. Him and his wife and the other wrestlers are doing this reality show. He also hosted that kind of, he was one of the judges on that kind of wacky, crazy show that was on during the pandemic. I think like him and Shaquille O'Neal were judges. It was actually a pretty interesting show. I didn't watch it all the time, but it was a fun, goofy.
I think that's what led to Shaq coming to AEW for a little bit.
And I was there for that match. That's actually Jade Cargill's first ever match, was teaming with Shaquille O'Neal against Red Velvet and Cody Rhodes. So I was there for that one. So my point is, if Cody felt that WWE was such a bigger platform, he was in the process of being part of building a bigger platform, because just like Chris Jericho says that he's the Undertaker of AEW, as far as being the old guy who gets all the respect, and I believe that. I'll take that metaphor on face value. Cody was kind of the Sting of AEW. He may not have won every single time. He may not be Ambrose, who's probably having the best matches, or Moxley, John Moxley. But Cody was right up there, and I think that
yes, he was.
Cody leaving AEW, not to dwell on it all night, because what's done is done, but I think he kind of it hurt both. I think it was a hurt. And to tell you the truth, the fans can also blame themselves, because I feel like the AEW fans who actually booed Cody, well, guess what? You got your wish. You left. And I think that Cody, if he was not getting booed, if he wasn't the babyface getting booed, I think he probably would have stuck around. But let's move on to another point here. There's a tradition, and this is another topic I want to get into, because we have basically three people here. Actually, four people in the Rhodes family, in my opinion, have been treated less than spectacular by the WWE. So, of course, we have Dusty Rhodes, and Dusty had competed in the WWF or the WWF in the late 70s and early 80s before Vince kind of went into an island, right? back when the WWF was still a part of the National Wrestling Alliance, but it was kind of undercover. But when Dusty came back in 90, there's Dusty, so we'll talk about that, 89, 91, Dusty Rhodes with the polka dots, right? Then half a generation later, 95 through, quite a ways away, because Goldust, Cody's older brother, Dustin Rhodes, back and forth between the WWF, the WWE, and TNA, and all these other promotions. But basically, when he was a WWE or WWF guy, Dustin Rhodes is Goldust. We'll get into that. I think that was a bit of a humiliation, a bit of a embarrassment to have this cowboy, Dustin Rhodes, basically play a cross-dressing, feminine character. And then his wife at the time, Terry Runnels, that was known as Marlena, she actually kind of gets out of there looking the best out of any of them. And then we finally get ourselves to Stardust, Dashing Cody Rhodes, all the other crap gimmicks they put on young Cody until he left and came back. And as Jimmy just pointed out, when he did come back, it was not to be the conquering son. It was to, in my opinion, Jimmy, they take the guy that went to the Indies, they take the guy that did his own thing, they take the guy that put his name with all the list of all the independent wrestlers, Kurt Angle and everybody else that he wanted to wrestle on the Indies, and the guy that was the guy that said, no, I will not be Stardust, I will not be a mid-carder, I'm going to find my own way.
And he rolled well because he did good for himself. He became NWA champion. He helped start a promotion that now has created so many jobs for other performers and other backstage personnel. It gave an alternative to the fans, an alternative for the wrestlers. So now if you're not happy, you can leave.
Right. And so that's the guy, Jimmy, the guy that does all that in Vince and Triple H's mind. That's not who they put the big title on. That's not who they have beat their guy at WrestleMania. That's the guy, in this case Cody, that they crucify. That's the guy that that's the guy that they have humiliate, have him lose. And then because Cody is doing the best he can with the situation, and I kind of wonder if Cody even cares, or if he's just naive, or if he wants to believe that they're going to look out for him in the end. I mean, it's hard to believe that Cody would be that naive at this point after what they did to him and his father and his brother, but I guess that he is, or he just doesn't care because he likes all the zeros in his paycheck, so he's willing to lose at WrestleMania. I think Cody, if he were to wrestle Roman again at this year's WrestleMania, he'd be eating another pin because...
Oh, no. This time, if he does wrestle Roman, he will lose clean as a sheet. Mark my words, because, and I know nobody wants to hear this, Triple H is no different than Vince. When it comes to the things that matter, when it comes to the tippy top spots, when it comes to the business model of having a prop, not a megastar, because you can't control a megastar, you can control a prop. When it comes to protecting that prop, they will protect that prop at all costs. And that means Cody's going to be nailed to that cross on national television. He's going to be put up for the whole world to see, and he's going to be used as an example. This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. And I'm sure they have more disdain for him than most, because he actually started competition for them, and they don't want competition. I can say that unequivocally, because when they have competition, they have to actually do things the right way, meaning you have to let guys get over, which means they have more leverage, which means they have the ability to tell you, the promoter, no, I'm not doing this stupid shit because it's bad for my character. Remember how Steve Austin went to Vince and said, Vince, I'm not the ringmaster. Could any wrestler do that today in WWE? Can any of them go to Triple H say, I'm not doing this gimmick? Right. No.
And I'll give an example real quick. Keith Lee was doing so well at NXT under the WWE umbrella. He gets brought up to the main roster, and he becomes Bearcat Keith Lee for a couple of weeks. We can just list a few names here. Karrion Kross. He was doing so well in NXT as a world beater with a beautiful woman, like the Sable-esque wife, the real life wife. They take the wife
Except this one
away.
actually liked wrestling and is talented.
Right, right. So the point is, and I think that fans, and as a side point here, the fans of WWE that love to shit on AEW, they should really be thanking AEW for even existing. Because if you compare the creative of WWE, say from 2014 to 2021, 22,
It's night and day
you can
when
see
it comes to a lot of things.
right. And why is that? And why did their creative get better? Because suddenly they had a hint of competition. And now you can compare numbers, but one number is a legitimate thing. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, everyone was, oh, the NXT is so much better than the main roster. And even our buddy here, Michael AJ Norris, says that now. But at the time, I would hear this from my friend Morrow all the time. Well, I don't watch the SmackDown or Raw. I only watch NXT.
That was me. That was me for a while, Mikey, because this was my situation. Raw was too long for me to actually sit through 3 hours, and SmackDown was no better. NXT gave me an hour a week, a pay-per-view every couple of months, and I got to scratch my wrestling itch. And you want to know something? Look at who you had. Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Sami Zayn, Hideo Itami. Then you had the tag division. You had the Vaudevillains. You had the Ascension. You had the Lucha Dragons. Then you had the American Alpha. Then you had DIY. Then you got Shinsuke Nakamura, Bobby Roode, Drew McIntyre. That was a great roster of talent. And guess what? Everyone got their time to shine. Even Bray Wyatt's brother, Bo Dallas, down in NXT, the guy was treated like a big deal, and he was a great heel. Adrian Neville, who we know as Pac, was down there. He was their champion, and he was great at whatever he was doing. And once they got to the main roster and they had to deal with Vince, it's like Vince didn't know what to do. Triple H in NXT was perfect. Triple H on the main roster, I give him credit. He has done better with certain things, but when it comes to that tippy top spot, he's no better than Vince. Because I've seen zero. Because ever since he took power, there's been zero change. I'll put it to you this way: they had to create another world title because their champion can't be bothered to come to work. This is the same guy that they false advertised Brock Lesnar so that Roman could come out and say Brock chose not to show up. You remember that?
I don't actually. When was that?
That was heading into WrestleMania 34.
Okay,
They were
okay.
doing Roman versus Brock 2, or as I affectionately like to call it, Beach Ball Mania. That Brock was so pissed when that match was over because no one gave a shit about it. The second the bell rang, the fans were shitting on the match because no one wanted to see it.
Let me jump in on that. I remember that. I think that took place in Tampa or somewhere in Florida.
It was in Florida.
And actually, you're right.
No. That WrestleMania was in New Orleans.
Okay, New Orleans. So the fans emotionally checked out of the main event of WrestleMania. That was the same card that had the Cena-Undertaker 2-minute squash match. It was the same card that will forever be defined by Nicholas, a 12-year-old kid or maybe a 9-year-old kid winning the tag team title. Let me get on some people here that have been lost in the shuffle. I mean, and let me get back to the Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, let's get back to the Rhodes family.
The Rhodes family, to me, and I think you said something a few minutes ago, buddy, about the difference between a megastar and a prop. Well, in my opinion, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, Jim Crockett Promotions, 1985, main eventing Starrcade 2 years in a row against Ric Flair. War Games was Dusty's invention. The mid-'80s Dusty Rhodes, who was probably in his mid-40s at that time and was not in the best of shape physically, he's 302 pounds, that's what they build him as, and he's basically as white-hot a babyface as you can be at 45 years old and out of shape and he's their version of Hulk Hogan. Now, yes, they had Magnum TA, but he got hurt. Sting wasn't
Yes.
right. Sting wasn't there yet. Sting didn't come around till '88. So in 85, 86, 87, when Crockett Promotions actually was the only game in town challenging WWF with pay-per-views, with promotional things like cups and 7-Eleven and stuff like that. The only competition anywhere for WWF was Jim Crockett, and Dusty Rhodes was a creative force behind the scenes, and he was a wrestler. So he's doing some of Vince's job, Vince McMahon, and he's doing some of Hogan's job. But when Dusty had a falling out in '88, when Crockett sold to Turner and Dusty wanted to bleed with the Road Warriors, and eventually Vince gives Dusty a job, and credit to Vince for hiring Dusty, but he has to give that little spin, that little rib, as the wrestlers call it. And of course, Bruce Pritchard or whoever will deny it. I think even Dusty.
Oh, forget it.
Right, but the Pope
grave defending Vince.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off, but Jimmy just said that Bruce Pritchard will always defend Vince. But putting Dusty Rhodes in polka dots was the WWF, Bruce and Vince, or Pat Patterson. Okay, Dusty, we'll give you a nice 6-figure contract for a couple of years. We'll help you get out of your debt or whatever it is. We'll put you on the notebooks and some a Hasbro action figure. You'll be part of the team. But while you're a part of our team, you'll wear our uniform, and your uniform has polka dots on it. Because God forbid if they had just done the Crockett version of the mid-40-year-old Dusty Rhodes, just a redneck ass kicker guy who just speaks with a flow, baby. They could have done that, Dusty, but they had to pantomime him. They had to make him a joke of himself because they did not like the fact that Dusty got over without them. That Dusty was a worldwide star based on his stuff in Florida, Georgia, Texas, all the territories, Dusty in Japan. They had to put Dusty in his place. A generation later, I would make the case that when they got Goldust in '95, that was more of a way to shit on Dusty yet again, because Dusty had gone back to Turner, was a commentator, was a behind-the-scenes guy, and Dusty was on the other team. I don't think they had anything personal against Dustin Rhodes, except, you know what? If we put Dusty's son...
screw his father, we'll screw his son.
Right. We'll screw his son. We'll put him in a banana suit. We'll make him effeminate. The original Goldust had all these homosexual stuff, and then they kind of phased it out and just made him a freak in general, right? But we have to... the son will pay for the sins of the father. Now, they didn't Red Roosterize him, because Goldust actually won matches. He won the Intercontinental title. He had a great ice. He beat Razor Ramon, who was a top guy. They actually let him win because
the backlot brawl with Rowdy Piper.
Right. So they did maximize him, but in a way, they didn't want the cowboy Dustin Rhodes, the natural. They didn't want that because that's too Southern. Here's my other thing, Jimmy. I think that Vince McMahon is a self-hating Southerner. Because if you
Cornette has talked about that many times, because him and JR were a commentary team for a short time in '98, and they were a pretty damn good one, and a lot of people backstage complimented them. And the answer he was given as to why they had to be busted up, they were too Southern.
Right, and Jim, and so you're saying that Jim, because Vince McMahon's from North Carolina, he was raised, I believe, in part by his stepfather that was abusive to him. And I believe all that bad stuff, and I feel bad for Vince for that.
Oh, so do I. No one deserves that, even Vince.
Right, but he grew up in that environment, and I think in the darkest corridors of Vince's traumatic childhood
comes from that.
Yeah, his traumatic childhood comes from, I was abused by my stepfather. The abuse took place in North Carolina. North Carolina is the South. Therefore, I hate the South. I hate all Southerners. I don't want Jim Ross getting over too much. I don't want Southern wrestlers getting over too much. I don't want Tony Schiavone because he has a Southern accent. That's my feelings on that. So, getting back to the Rhodes family, every Rhodes, and I think Marlena, oddly enough, because she was in by marriage, and I think if you take a look at it, they kind of use Marlena or Terry Runnels. She was not a wrestler. She was tiny. She was pretty. She was gorgeous. She had a good body. She was willing to show a lot of skin.
Absolutely.
But they never, I don't think they really ever humiliated Terry Runnels because she was kind of a good sport about it and she wasn't a wrestler, right? So, but
And plus, if
Cody,
you remember, it was after Dustin and her got married that Dustin and Dusty didn't speak for a while.
yeah, right. So she's going against Dusty. So they kind of, sure, we'll bring in Terry, we'll bring in Marlena because we're giving her a paycheck, and that'll go up Dusty Rhodes' ass even more. That we're giving his daughter-in-law that he doesn't like a paycheck. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure you've seen this one, Jimmy. Did you ever see the thing where Dustin Rhodes imitated his father on Monday Night Raw?
I honestly did not.
Well, it's on YouTube, and it's basically it's a really insulting segment. They have Bruce Pritchard doing a Dusty Rhodes impersonation on the voiceover, but then they have Dustin Rhodes not in the Goldust outfit. He comes out on Monday Night Raw, and he's got like the T-shirt full of balloons or full of pillows, and he's strutting around, and he's basically doing a humiliating impersonation of his own father, and that's what they did because they always wanted to stick it to the guy that got over without him,
Yeah,
and that's
without
Dusty
their help.
Rhodes.
And
Right.
ironically, the next Rhodes we got to get to did the same thing. He got over without their blessing. A matter of fact, he got over in spite of how badly he was booked for years, which is a testament to Cody. Because how many people do you know could have been Stardust for as long as he was and become as big of a star as he's become? Completely on his own merit, which is
Right.
not easy to do. Because once you have that stigma of, oh, you're that, people don't take you seriously. So, again, I'm not a big fan of Cody, but I do have to give him credit because he did something that not many can do. He was booked like garbage for years, and he managed to turn himself into a big time star. And I'm sure somewhere his father's proud of him. But WWE doesn't give a shit about that.
No, and here's the thing I did, and Jimmy, if you remember, I actually did a video before WrestleMania last year where I said that Roman Reigns had a 90% chance of beating Cody Rhodes, and Cody had a 10% chance of beating Roman Reigns for the
Everyone
title.
said you were nuts, but
Every
you were spot on.
was
You were
spot on.
because unfortunately, it's like I said at the top of this video, you and I are blessed, or in this case, cursed, with being three-dimensional thinkers. When you're a two-dimensional thinker, you don't see things before they happen. But when you're a three-dimensional thinker, you see things for what they are and you see them before they happen. I mean,
Well,
I don't know why anyone is surprised by that. I sure as hell wasn't. And that's why, you know, now you're seeing a lot of people, they're kind of mocking Cody. If you look at the internet, they're kind of mocking Cody. It's like, oh, you'll have to finish your story another time, which is kind of a shitty thing to do, you know. And it shows to me, Mikey, I don't know if you've noticed this, is that not all wrestling fans, but there's a certain segment of wrestling fans that have a real serious lack of empathy and a serious lack of being able to put themselves in that other person's shoes. I mean, I feel one of the reasons why I'm halfway decent at my job is because I am constantly in my patient's shoes because of my sick parent. My wife's got her fair share of medical issues. As a matter of fact, she was in the hospital the week before Christmas, which was
wow.
tough. Thank God she's home and she's doing better. Uh, so they can't imagine working their butts off, earning their place, and still not getting their just due. Which to me, all of us have had that happen to us at one point or another in our lives. So I don't know how you don't empathize with Cody for what he's going through because he is in a no-win situation. And if he does, I'll put it to you this way, Mikey. If Cody Rhodes beats Roman clean and wins that belt at any point, I will have no problem coming on this page, coming on this show and saying I was wrong. Because I would much rather, and I said this to a friend of mine earlier today, I would much rather be wrong and see something spectacular happen than be right and have to do videos like this.
Well, I'll put this out there, Jimmy, to up the stakes a little bit. if Cody Rhodes ever beats Roman Reigns clean, or just beats him, period, and wins, if Cody Rhodes defeats Roman Reigns in this title reign and wins that championship before anybody else does, or before Roman, gives up the title or whatever happens, if Cody's the one to beat him for that title that Roman's enjoying now, I will shave my mustache.
Oh no, Mikey, don't do that because it looks great. You look like a much better looking version of Ole Anderson. Don't do it.
but here's the whenever people on Facebook, you might have seen me do this, when they make a proclamation of some type with wrestling, I always say, okay, if this doesn't happen, will you shave your head? You know what I mean? And I think
they're very quick to disappear.
they're very quick. Here's another viewer that's chimed in. We have some more stuff from AJ we'll get back to. We've got about 8 minutes left, just so you know, Jimmy. We're going to wrap this up at the 59-minute point. Brian Dehart, who's a new viewer. I thank you for being here, Brian.
Thank you very much.
CM Punk is absolutely going to win a championship. Well, you did not decipher it, Brian, and you still have time. A championship, but we haven't distinguished. Which one? And I think what's going to happen, what I think is going to happen, Brian, and I'll let Jimmy chime in, is I think, like you said, the trickle down effect. Roman's going to get The Rock,
which he would win handily.
Right. They push. Then Cody gets demoted to facing Seth at the end of night 1. And then CM Punk's got to wrestle Drew McIntyre or somebody that's a threat. I think that might be a nice matchup anyway. And I think another whole thing is how poorly Drew McIntyre has been treated. But I think that CM Punk eventually gets to lose to Roman, because I think
that's coming. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want him to go back there. I'm like, dude, think about this. Punk has 0 WrestleMania main events. Do you remember how popular he was in his peak?
Yeah, I do.
I don't think Roman was ever that popular when he was a babyface.
No, he wasn't. So I think CM Punk, I don't think he even gets a WrestleMania main event this year.
Not at all. And I feel bad for him because he absolutely deserved to do so. If I had my way, Cody would be beating Roman, Punk would be beating Rollins. Maybe you then have the cash in with Damian Priest. LA Knight should be beating Logan Paul for that U.S. title because he's too popular to ignore. You have Gunther. You have to pick someone proper for Gunther to either drop that belt to, or have Gunther face Brock Lesnar and retire him. I mean, who better to put Brock Lesnar out? Right. Gunther's been killing it. I mean, I have to say, the clips that I've seen on YouTube, Gunther doesn't get tired.
Right.
He's like as hard-nosed of an old school heel, but he wins clean. That's the thing.
Jimmy, why don't you take on this question from AJ? Gunther, if he faces Roman, who would win that match? So if we're saying right now Gunther is Intercontinental Champion, where would they have that? If Gunther as IC Champion challenges the 2 championship Roman.
Well, that's an interesting dynamic because that's 2 heels facing each other.
Right.
Which we haven't had that since Royal Rumble when Rollins faced Roman.
Right.
So that's an interesting dynamic. I'm sorry to disappoint you, AJ, but LOL Roman wins because that's what they've conditioned me to think. I wish that Gunther would have a fighting chance because in my estimation, Gunther's a better in-ring performer than Roman. I mean, the guy is having great matches with whoever he wrestles. That's a testament to him. And on top of that, his matches don't have a ton of interference. They don't have the bells and the whistles. They don't have all that extra nonsense that you usually find in a Roman match. Gunther's having great straight-up matches. In a lot of ways, not that he's on the same level technically, but he is reminding me of Bret Hart in the aspect of he's not having specialty matches, but they're all good. That's why I wish Cody would have won last year, because then I'd be saying, Cody, that's who you're losing the belt to, Gunther. Could you imagine Gunther and Cody for the title? That would be spectacular. because Cody's gotten way better as a worker, and Gunther, I can't praise him enough. I think that they would have a great title match. And you wouldn't need the bells and the whistles. You just need those two and the referee.
I did a whole other video on my prediction that Roman Reigns is going to beat Bruno's record. If you start Roman Reigns' world title, basically merging the lineages of his Universal Championship over Braun and the late Bray Wyatt. That match, I think that was SummerSlam 2020 in the pandemic era. I think
it actually was the pay-per-view after. It was a few days after because they had a secondary pay-per-view. I don't remember what it was.
And God, good memory. So I think basically we're headed to Roman getting the 7.5 years or wherever it takes. And I did a whole video where I explore that. The basic premise, though, is the WWE modern day, whether it's Vince or Triple H or Stephanie, they don't want you to reference Bruno Sammartino, some guy from the 1960s, as your longest reigning champion. They want or Hulk Hogan. They want the fans of today and tomorrow to reference somebody they know, which would be Roman Reigns. So even the 5-year-old kid, right? In the 5-year-old kid now that can remember Roman Reigns as a longtime champion, when he grows up to be 35, 40, 50, when that 5-year-old kid of 2024 has kids of his own, they can reference Roman Reigns as the longest reigning champion in the year 2050 or 2060, as opposed to some guy from 100 years earlier named Bruno Sammartino that they can't make money off of. So my whole point was they're not totally erasing history, but they're modernizing history. That's why the New Day beat Demolition's reign. That's why Gunther beat the Honky Tonk Man's record reign. The other thing I want to say real quick, buddy, is when people are saying that Roman Reigns is going to beat Hulk Hogan's record, Hulk Hogan doesn't have a longevity record.
No, Bruno does.
Right. Hogan's on the list. Hogan's third or fourth down on the list after another Bruno and Backlund, and then I think Hogan's third after them. But my point is, there is no Hulk Hogan record or Pedro Morales record. They just like there's not one of the GOATs. You're the GOAT, the greatest of all time, or you're somebody else. There's not 20 GOATs, folks.
what some don't understand, and I mentioned this a little earlier, and then we'll wrap it up. The main thing with Roman Reigns is he is their biggest pet project.
Right.
He is their experiment of just picking someone out, saying, okay, we can control him. He will do as we say. He'll be a model citizen. He's our top star. And just put everything behind that person. And anyone who is a threat, we will circumvent, we will sabotage, we will undercut, and that's just the way it is. That's why, to me, and I don't know where you stand on this, Mikey, whatever he does is tainted to me because that top spot was handed to him on a silver platter. It's not like he was the most over guy in the business and then he got the spot, or he was the second or third. It was just literally just thrust to him, and he willingly accepted it. So, whether I'm saying he isn't great or someone else is saying he is, neither of us really know because the guy's never been tested. I can say Austin was tested. He constantly had The Rock, The Undertaker, and Foley coming for his spot. I'm not talking in the kayfabe sense. I'm talking in a literal sense. Hogan, he constantly had Piper and Warrior and Savage nipping away at his heels, trying to become popular enough to take that top spot. Roman goes to bed at night knowing he doesn't have to worry about losing that spot because it's his until he leaves, because that's the environment they've created, and he willingly accepts it. So
he's the chosen one.
If you're a fan of Roman, God bless you, but how could you sing the guy's praises when his spot is never in danger? And it's not because he's better than everyone else, which he's not. It's because the company has chosen to just protect him. And
he's the chosen one.
Exactly. And to me, there shouldn't be a chosen one. The only time there should be a chosen one is when that audience is completely behind him, like Hogan, like Austin, Flair, like The Rock.
Jimmy, I got to wrap this up because I want to be able to rebroadcast the stream, so we got to get out of here. But MikeMessier.com, Jimmy Faluca. What's the name of your pro wrestling group on Facebook?
The Pro Wrestling Collective. Everyone is welcome.
Pro Wrestling Collective on Facebook. We're going to end it here. And folks, tune in. We've got more stuff. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel. And Jimmy and I will see you next time.
Take care.